Welcome to the Dream Journal. From the studios of KSQD in Santa Cruz, the Dream Journal is a weekly show where we explore the power of nighttime dreams through conversations with dream experts and with listeners like you. A dream can be meaningful even if you don't know what it means. How can Tibetan monks who practice dream yoga shine a light on the latest sleep research? This week's guest is Dr. Ken Poller, a cognitive neuroscientist and one of the IASD conference keynotes. He will talk about what his research says about how we can enhance the value of our sleep and dreaming. I am your host, Katherine Bell of Experiential Dreamwork, and welcome to the Dream Journal. We'll be taking call-ins during the last 30 minutes of the show. You can also email us anytime at onair@ksqd.org. I'm going to start with just a glimpse of a dream I had this morning. I woke up trying to play and sing a song that I actually know extremely well. It was all frustrating. The ukulele wasn't right, and I got the chords and the lyrics all wrong. And so I woke up and I thought, okay, how's this dream helping? I'm going to learn that song. And I immediately went over all the lyrics and the chords since I have friends coming over later today, and this is exactly the song I think I'd like to play with them. So even though it was an anxiety dream, an anxious making dream, I decided to use it to help me do better today. And dreams do help us, even the ones we don't remember. There's something about the dreams that are so powerful. And our guest today is Dr. Ken Poller. He has lots more to say about that. Hello, Ken. Good to have you on the show.
Good to be with you.
Thanks. Dr. Ken Poller is a cognitive neuroscientist who is professor of psychology and director of the Cognitive Neuroscience Program at Northwestern University. His laboratory group made early progress in studying memory reactivation during sleep. In his recent studies, dream content was strategically modified using quiet sounds during REM sleep. He also studies intentional dreaming, and you can find our guest at kenpoller.com. That's P-A-L-L-E-R, kenpoller.com. Am I saying that right, Ken?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, excellent. So, yeah, this is so wonderful to have you on the show. You will be at the IASD conference, one of the keynotes, and I'm really excited to have some strong research promoted there at the show. And I want to start with some of the non-dream aspects of sleep that you study. There's something called memory reactivation that happens during sleep. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that. What is that, and how can we enhance it?
Yeah, so sleep gives us many things, and one of the things it seems to give us is helping with our memory storage. So this has been controversial over the last few decades, but finally the evidence got quite strong, and so now it's a widely accepted idea that one of the things that happens during sleep is our brain is processing the memories we've acquired that day and helping the storage to be more effective, because of course we don't remember so many things. But some things we do remember, and so it seems that there's additional processing. You learn something during the day, and it doesn't immediately sort of become a solid memory. That takes some time. It takes practice, just like skills take practice. And so this practice is something that we think now happens during offline periods when you're not doing anything much or when you're sleeping. And so the way we tried to understand more about that is doing this reactivation business. So let me tell you about that. Since the evidence wasn't quite so clear, we wanted to see, can we actually change memory processing during sleep so we can study it? And so the method we used and others have used is called Targeted Memory Reactivation, or TMR. And what we do is we play some sounds or we present some odors that essentially remind people of what they learned before they went to sleep. And the odors and sounds are not disturbing sleep. And people don't know they're going to get sounds or odors. They don't know they got them when they woke up. But we can show that their memory's better for the things that got reactivated. So, for example, we had people learn a bunch of objects and where they went on the screen. They had to memorize the spatial locations, and each object had a sound. So the cat was in a particular location on the screen. It came with a meow. Every time they saw the cat and tried to learn exactly where it went, they heard the meow. And then we presented the meow during sleep, during slow wave sleep, while they were napping, and along with a bunch of other object sounds. And what happened is those sounds must have gotten in without waking people up and reactivated their memory for the cat and where it was located, because when people woke up, they were better able to recall the locations. So we showed that with these little sound presentations, we could change spatial memory. And then we could study the brain physiology of that, what happens in the brain when you work through memories. And we can see that that physiology is there processing memories even when there are no sounds. So every night we're bringing up memories and working through them. And I have a little metaphor, a paper I wrote called Do House Elves Clean Your Brain While You Sleep? Because the idea from Harry Potter is the house elves do all this work overnight and clean everything up. And so that's a little idea that our brain is working through all the memories that you've acquired and organizing them and looking for connections between things, between the things that happened yesterday and memories you had from long ago, trying to coordinate everything together, because that's how we remember. We remember events because they are meaningful. They connect to other things, and that's, anything we remember has to have all those connections. So that seems to be happening overnight, and we can measure the brain physiology of it happening, and we can tweak it with little sound presentations that bias you to reactivate the specific memories we choose to reactivate. And we can do it for playing music. For example, if people learn a little melody, we actually had people learn 2 melodies, and then we present one of those melodies during sleep, and they can perform that melody better when they wake up compared to the melody we didn't present. So maybe you're normally, if you're working on some performance with your ukulele, your brain might be, as I know you do, your brain might be working on that overnight, and it's not necessary to present the sounds, that's just how we study it. But it's happening there, and we can monitor that, and the result is your performance is better the next day, to the extent that's happening effectively. And so
well, that's interesting. I mean, 2 things that will come to mind. One is be careful what you listen to while you're asleep. Like maybe falling asleep to the TV and the radio is not such a good idea. Unless, on the other hand, this reminds me also of the, is it Aldous Huxley, the whole thing of playing words at night, basically brainwashing people by playing things. Is that? Yeah,
that was in Brave New World. And it was called Hypnopedia, and the idea was you could learn something during your sleep passively, like learn a foreign language, which we think isn't actually possible. But nevertheless, there's something to it. I mean, so sleep researchers stayed away from that for decades because it seemed like a complete scam. Nothing like that could really happen. But actually something does happen, and it's not about learning new things while you're asleep, although that's a little possible. It's really about perfecting the learning that you started while you're awake, because learning isn't immediate. It takes some time, and so that learning is happening, and the sounds during sleep do change that. And in Brave New World, it was just one of the ways that the totalitarian government would, indoctrinate children from a very young age by taking use of that strategy. So there is something to it, but we can use it with our own intentions in mind rather than someone else deciding what's going to happen.
Yeah, well, it makes total sense to me that people can hear things while they're sleeping, even if it's not enough to wake them up. I mean, any parent knows that. But just the other day, we actually had a pretty big earthquake here in Santa Cruz. And there's the dog. That's okay. And then I woke up like seconds before the earthquake, because I heard it, the surface wave coming across the top. I heard that swishing sound, and I remember from the great earthquake of '89, the Loma Prieta earthquake, that sound of the earthquake coming, and I woke up to the sound, and I'm like, oh, what's coming? Something's coming. And then a second later, things started moving, and then I could hear it move off in the other direction, it went from east to west from where I am. And so like that sound, even though it wasn't very loud, it sparked in me a memory of the earthquake, and it was like, this is important, wake up. And so I woke up, and a couple pictures tumbled off my shelves and things. So it was like good to be awake when it hit. It was like my only early seismic warning system. So tell us about how would you suggest people use this to enhance their experience of life?
Well, we're exploring it now in a bunch of ways. So sleep gives us many benefits for physical and mental health, and we're trying to figure out how can we maximize those, how can we help people that aren't getting enough sleep, who might have a sleep disorder that's preventing them from getting good sleep. Can we manipulate sleep? We sometimes call it sleep engineering. Can we change what's happening during sleep? Of course, you can do things before you go to bed as well. But there isn't a magic pill you can take that's going to get you ideal sleep.
Just want a pill. Can't get a pill.
But we're still trying to think, can we understand what's happening and then change it a little bit that could help people? We're looking at sleep apnea. We're looking at insomnia. We want to see, can these little sounds that are, as you mentioned, getting in and having an impact, can we find ways to use that for people's benefit? Maybe the anxiety you have during sleep is helpful sometimes, but maybe it isn't always. And can we actually push that? I'd like to think, can we make people wake up on the right side of the bed? If let's say you have depression and you're just thinking over negative thoughts over and over again, you're ruminating about that all day. Well, we think you might also be ruminating it at night without quite knowing that you're doing that. It's kind of a habit, and we can have good habits, we can have bad habits, and that might be a bad sleep habit that we could then kind of adjust by presenting sounds. That's one of our new ideas. We're only just beginning to test it, so I'm not telling you something that we know works. I'm telling you a new venture in science to try to see if we can come up with something that would be useful for people. And so this is the idea that what happens during sleep, you're not helpless there, but you can do something about it. And lucid dreaming is another example. Dream yoga we can talk about is yet another example. So there are various strategies that people have used through the years to try to change what happens during sleep. And our method of presenting sounds, this TMR method, opens up another door for some other strategies that might be helpful. So that's been really exciting. And, we've been focusing on slow wave sleep, this type of deep sleep, because the evidence just is so strong that memory processing is happening then. I think it's happening during other stages too. It's only a little harder to study, and we haven't quite understood what's happening during light sleep, what's happening during REM sleep. Those are still exciting questions, and deep sleep is a really important part. It's probably not the whole story.
Well, there's something about that because we go through the cycles every night of deep sleep to lighter REM sleep to deep sleep again. But the early on in the night, the slow wave sleep, the deeper sleep, that's emphasized. So sorry, dreamers, that's actually the most important thing, I think. But then the REMs come up pretty soon. The REM sleep, the dreams come up pretty soon. So that's also very important. And definitely by the end of the night, there's a lot more REM sleep than slow wave sleep. So maybe the house elves have finished cleaning and now we get to take care of our dreams. And I love this idea of seeing if we can interrupt maybe even the depression cycle or PTSD by influencing what's happening when we sleep. What about using this kind of technology like sounds or smells to influence dreams? Have you done so much research with that, or have you started to think about that? Yeah,
we've been moving on that in the last few years. One of the first steps that we took was to see if our method of TMR could be used during REM sleep to provoke lucid dreaming. So that was sort of an exciting endeavor. And lucid dreaming, of course, is when you know you're dreaming at the time of the dream. And it's rare. Many people never have them. Some people have them once in a while, but not as often as they like. And it's hard to study because it's so rare. So there's a history, Stephen LaBerge and others, for the last few decades, but it's been really difficult to have large studies with large numbers of people because of the rarity. So we wanted to see if we could provoke it. And so our TMR method has been used for that. But instead of learning faces or objects or melodies, we had people learn to develop a lucid mindset, to think carefully about their experience, mindfully looking for details that might cue them in about whether they're awake or asleep. And so they did that together with a specific sound. And we would play a sound like 3 beeps. So they'd hear these 3 beeps and they'd know, okay, I have to stop for a moment and check around and see, am I dreaming right now? And so they basically developed this conditioned habit of, I hear the beeps, I do that thing. And then we could play those sounds during REM sleep and have them also go to that same habit. And then sometimes realize they're dreaming. And we know that can work because we tell them, if you know you're dreaming, make an eye signal to us so we know you're dreaming. And so you might be in a dream world somewhere. Maybe you get the sound. For some reason you remember, oh, let me see, I might be dreaming right now. Oh, and you see something conclusive. I'm floating up in the air. Maybe I must really be dreaming. And then you're told, make the signal. So they do a left, right eye movement signal. We have electrodes here on the face as part of our recording sleep physiology. And we can see that signal very easily. That's, of course, been known for a long time. So then we can study lucid dreaming and then have further interactions with people. So now that we know we can present soft sounds to people without waking them up, sometimes those sounds get into the dream. So our 3 beeps might get into the dream. We've used a bunch of other sounds to get into the dream and actually help people change the dream. We discovered we can make people dream about certain experiences they had before sleep. We can have them dream about certain puzzles that we had them work on and they failed to solve during sleep. So we can talk about those experiments. But basically, yes, lots of ways to influence dreaming. And we're at the beginning of exploring how far can we use that and how much could it help people.
Right, that's fabulous. In fact, you've started to look a little bit about communicating. Well, I guess you kind of are. By the beeps, you're communicating with people who are dreaming, and they can communicate back with the eye motions. So there is like a way of communicating from your sleep to people who are awake. That's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, let me mention that. There was a paper we published in 2021. My PhD student, Karen Konkoly, was the first author, and she did many experiments. This is one of the first ones she did in our lab. And actually, when we did the experiment, we thought she had been the first one to discover two-way communication. We knew one-way communication with the eye movements before, but this was two-way. She asked questions, they answered questions while they were asleep. And we used math questions because we wanted to know what the correct answer was. Because we actually want to ask people about their dreams where we don't know the answer. But we started with math problems so we could verify the method. And she showed that it worked. And then we discovered, actually, this master's student in Germany had done that before us, just not published it. And then we discovered, another group in France had been doing that. So we got together with those groups, and the 2021 paper is 4 different groups reporting similar results of two-way communication during sleep. So that opened the door to the method to now ask people about their dreams, and we can find out about their dreams in real time, look at the brain activity at that exact moment, and then also have people wake up and tell us about their dreams, which they may or may not remember. As you know, we forget so many dreams. And in fact, you might think, well, if you're lucid during a dream, if you know you're dreaming, maybe for sure you're going to remember that one. Not true. So we have evidence that people made the signals, they were talking to us, answering our questions, and then a few minutes later woke up and didn't remember the dream.
Even just a few minutes later, not the next morning? Wow.
No, it was I don't know, 5 minutes or something. So you can get distracted, you can forget, and maybe all of us have more lucid dreams than we know because we've forgotten them. That's kind of a possibility. So it's sort of a limitation of studying dreaming as we forget so many of them. You can get better. Some people are really good at it. You can practice it, get strategies to get better at it. But the fact is that they're not so easy to remember, which relates back to what I was talking about earlier with our memory reactivation. If we're consolidating memories, if we're reorganizing memories, that's a kind of a brain mode that's not conducive to learning new things. So you kind of switch to the brain mode of working on our memories and being creative and putting all these things together, and you're not really going to remember all that processing. But when you wake up, you can remember it, and so the dream is still there. If you grab it before it escapes, you can remember at that point. But while you're dreaming, not a really good time to store new information. I think it's not exactly compatible, these two different modes.
Interesting. Well, a couple things coming up for me around this. One is like my dream math is usually really bad, but then maybe from lucid and my prefrontal cortex comes online, the math gets better.
Yeah, we found, we asked simple questions. They were just little addition and subtraction questions. But we thought when we did the experiment, maybe people would hear it incorrectly because, it could come up as gobbledygook. You hear 8 minus 6, but maybe you think it was, grasshopper eats, something, or, you could hear something totally different. No, people seem to hear the questions correct. they computed the math correct. They answered us correctly. They often didn't respond at all, so the questions didn't always get in. But when they did get in, the answers were almost always right.
Okay.
So we think understanding what's happening is not as impaired as we feared it might be. Okay. And so now we ask questions. We ask other things. So Karen Conkley did another experiment she was keen to do. I'll tell you about it real briefly. Yeah. She wanted to know what happens when you close your eyes in a dream. And we know already that when you close your eyes when you're awake, you get big alpha EEG over the back of the head. That's just a sign of the visual system in our brain changing when you close your eyes and relaxing a bit. And so that's, pretty universally found. So she asked, well, what happens if you close your eyes in your dream? So she needed people to make a signal when they close their eyes, and then make a signal to say, I'm seeing things now, or I close my eyes and I'm not seeing anything. So she had 4 different signals, and they were all sniff signals. So instead of eye movements, we put a nasal cannula, and people were breathing normally, and you could see the breathing signal, and then they'd go, and we'd see, 3 sniffs. So they did 1, 2, 3, or 4 sniffs to tell us if their eyes were open, if their eyes were closed, if they see stuff and they don't see stuff. So sometimes people would close their eyes in a dream and still see. I don't know if you've ever tried that in your dreams, but
I've had the experience of like being blindfolded or something, but then after a while I can sort of see through it. So I've had that experience. Yes.
Yeah. So the dream world's got some different rules.
I get that. Okay, it's interesting to explore that.
Yeah.
So before we get to the break, I want to spend a few minutes talking about the monks. Tell me about these Tibetan monks and their dream yoga. How are you working with them, and what kind of questions are you asking? What is that like also? Yeah.
Well, let me start by saying this dialogue between scientists and Buddhists has been going on for a while. I've been very interested in it. The Mind and Life Institute has sponsored it. The Dalai Lama has been involved with many scientists. So that's been exciting because there's a lot of commonality in neuroscience, thinking about how the brain works, how it controls our thinking and behavior. There's a lot of, areas for crosstalk between Buddhism and science about all that. So it's been exciting to be involved in that. And separately from that, I volunteered to contribute to teaching of neuroscience to monks and nuns. And this is a program that's been going on for a couple of decades now. I just started in 2018. It's a program run by a professor, Geshe Lobsang Negi, at Emory University. So Emory University has been sponsoring this program called the Emory Tibet Science Initiative, and they've been adding science training to the curriculum of these Tibetan monks and monasteries who do like a 10-plus year training in philosophy. So, for hundreds of years, they've had this curriculum. It's Tibetan Buddhist philosophy. And now it's got these extra components of science because they thought, we should really have their training include that too. And so various professors helped, and now it's sort of being taken on board with teachers in the monastery teaching in Tibetan and having the monks and nuns learn science. And some of them are progressing to learning how to do science. So we were involved in that. Some of the monks and nuns came to Northwestern University for an internship for a couple of months, and we did that on 3 occasions with groups. Professor Robin Nusslock, my wife, Professor Marcia Grabowski, and I ran that thing at Northwestern through the Emory program, and we had to come up with projects for the monks to work on so they could learn the methods and understand more about doing science. And so one of the projects that we came up with was to have them study lucid dreaming in the laboratory, because it connects with this long-standing history over hundreds of years, maybe 900 plus years of a particular meditation practice. So, contemplative practices, they span all kinds of things, many different sorts of meditation practices, but some of them are engaged during sleep. And so this is what's known as Tibetan dream yoga, practices that are quite advanced meditation practices that you can read books about it from long ago, about instructions on how to do it, on instructions on the what can happen when you do it.
I've done a couple of workshops on that. It's fascinating.
Yeah, so it's got this amazing history, and as scientists, we always want to ask questions and think about, well, what have people had to say about that before? So here it is. Sleep engineering has this way old history of documented in these Buddhist texts. So we've been trying to learn more about that and do some of the first studies. So we've had experts in this practices come to the laboratory, and we can record their sleep, and they can make these signals with the sniffs and the eye movements to tell us at the moment they're in a dream performing some of these practices what exactly they're doing. And we should take some time to talk about, well, what are the practices? How are they meant to inform you? Because these are, you can use your lucid dreaming just for fun to engage in any activity, but in this case, they're looking for insights. They're looking for spiritual insights they take back to the waking state and live a different kind of life with more compassion, with more understanding of the world that can help them, in psychological well-being. And so we want to understand that. What do they do? How is it beneficial? And how can we understand that to maybe help other people to think of how we treat patients with PTSD that have nightmares, or pretty much anybody that might take advantage of what the dreams can be helping them understand by these explorations. And so we're at the beginning stage again of studying what they do. They're not the beginning stage. They've been doing it for hundreds of years, but we're kind of bringing a neuroscience perspective. So in neuroscience, we think about what's a first-person perspective on our experience. How do you perceive, remember, all those things? But also looking at, well, what's happening in the brain and what can we measure? How do we bring that all together to have a better understanding of the mind? Mm-hmm. And so this is a fascinating part of it, that during sleep, there's a pretty interesting experience we have that for most of us seems like we're awake. I mean, we're fooled into thinking we're awake when we're actually sleeping, but in a lucid dream, you can recognize that and think a little differently about it now that you know my brain is just manufacturing this experience and I'm not really in this particular environment. I'm sleeping somewhere, but here I am here. And then take that back to your waking state where you again can realize, well, actually, it looks like I'm just reading out the world because it comes into my sentences and I understand the world, but actually it's my brain creating this experience that I have with the input coming in and influencing it, but it's more of a brain process that gives me my understanding of the world, and to what extent is it giving me an accurate or useful understanding of the world, and how is it not working for me? And so those are really interesting questions to kind of think, to what extent is my waking experience like a dream? Mm-hmm. That's kind of one way of thinking about the insights from dream yoga.
Absolutely. I mean, maybe we have more agreement about what happens if there's more continuity in the waking world. But I know that the Tibetan dream yoga that I studied is that a lot of the focus of that was a preparation for death, and that when we're dying, we want to remain lucid and make choices as we go through the bardos into the death state, and so it kind of calls into question, as you're saying so beautifully, that what is the reality of this everyday waking world.
Yeah, that's an important lesson there, and it really shows how it's so much fun to kind of bring neuroscience and Buddhism together and thinking about these ideas in like I say, the way we can really make progress together. And that's why it's been so much fun to be involved in this training of the monks in neuroscience, because it's kind of a two-way street. We have a lot to learn from each other.
Well, it sounds like if you're enhancing their practices of going into their dreams and finding things that will increase empathy and compassion among humans, then you're really having a fabulous collaboration, really useful on both sides.
Yes, and so we're continuing it, and now the monasteries have these science centers, and we've been visiting one for the science training that we've done, and they've set up a sleep laboratory there, so they're able to run their own experiments, and this new generation of monks that is also trained in neuroscience and nuns joining that, they'll be able to ask whatever questions they want to ask with these methods. So they're sort of being given these tools, and then they'll be able to use them. Maybe they'll study dream yoga, maybe they'll study all kinds of other things, and that'll be up to them now.
That is very cool. So thank you so much. This is Dr. Ken Poller, and we're talking about some neuroscience around dreaming and memory reactivation and influencing dreams, and Tibetan monks and Buddhism, and what that can do with a collaboration between dream science and Buddhist monks. And we'll be taking a short break, and we're going to come back and talk a little bit about intentional dreaming. Maybe we'll get to two-way communication. Oh, we did talk a little bit already, two-way communication with REM. But there's also many other topics that I'm interested to talk about with Dr. Poller here. Poller's webpage is kenpoller.com, Ken, P-A-L-L-E-R. We are The Dream Journal, and The Dream Journal is broadcast live from the KSQD studios in Santa Cruz and co-broadcast live in San Jose by KCXU, and also rebroadcast up at KOWS in Sonoma. We are podcast everywhere, including on YouTube, where you can watch the full-length videos of these conversations. You can find them on Spotify, and then also on my YouTube page at Experiential Dreamwork. If you want to help us nudge the algorithm to spread interest in dreaming, please consider subscribing to the Dream Journal on your favorite podcast app or on YouTube. Thank you for your generous ratings and reviews, and thanks so much for sharing episodes on your social media. It really helps. But most importantly, consider telling your friends about the podcast. You might just find your next dream sharing buddy, and the Dream Journal is all about getting people to talk about their dreams more, to pay more attention, and to have more appreciation for their dreams. You can also follow the Dream Journal on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube by looking for @Experiential Dreamwork. And next week, we'll speak with Dina Metzger. She is a prolific writer, a healer, and a teacher. Dina's interested in how dream spirits speak to and guide communities. She has been on my list to talk to for quite a while now, and I'm excited to speak with her live on the air next week. Her newest book is a novella called The Story That Must Not Be Told, which she describes as a fiction that is not a fiction. So we'll have to tune in next week and find out more about that. Let's see. Okay. So, Ken Poller, so good to have you on the show.
Great to be here with you.
Yeah. So you're going to be up at the conference in Oregon and giving one of the keynotes. So I'm excited to hear about that. Is there anything you want to say about your presentation there?
I noticed from the schedule that there's a Midsummer Night's Dream performance afterwards. That's kind of amazing.
Oh, yes. We book a giant block of seats for all the conference participants, and you can buy a ticket if you want to be part of that experience and and watch, I believe it's the outdoor show, one of the outdoor shows, to be under the stars and watch Midsummer Night's Dream. So one of the features of Ashland is their wonderful Shakespeare program, and we get to be part of that. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. So we have Max here in the studio who has a question for Dr. Poller. What you got, Max?
Okay. Hi. And my question is, do you ever run into anybody who lucid dreams all the time?
Yeah, we're beginning some work in that direction. We have a few local lucid dreamers that lucid dream quite a lot, and they've been kindly volunteering in some of our experiments where we wanted to have lucid dreams. So we can provoke lucid dreams in people that don't have lucid dreams. We've done that. But the probability of getting a lucid dream on any particular night, it's a bit higher in those people that lucid dream a lot. So we brought them in for some of our experiments, and now and then we've had a film crew come by once or twice, and if we want a demonstration, we'll pick one of those people, and they might very well have a lucid dream while on camera, and that's actually happened, where they're making the eye movement signals. But maybe you're asking a little bit more. Actually, every dream being lucid, that's even more in the extreme, and so we haven't studied them in particular, but we're just starting a project that is in the early design stages where we are recruiting people who have lucid dreams quite a lot. And so you can email me and we'll put you on the list as we're just beginning the study. So we're not exactly sure how it's going to go, but we're acquiring a list of potential participants and would love to have you.
Okay. And then my next question is, how do you define lucid dreaming?
Well, it's simple to know you're dreaming at the time of the dream. So while you're still dreaming before you wake up. And I think most of us have non-lucid dreams. We realize it's a dream only when we wake up. and at that moment reinterpret the whole thing. But lucid dreamers realize that at the time, and it's maybe not quite binary. I mean, you can kind of perhaps suspect that you're actually dreaming, then you can be confident that you're actually dreaming, then you can kind of forget that you realize you were dreaming. So there's some middle ground there, but just that awareness is the definition. And then one step beyond that is controlling the lucid dream, and that's what dream yoga experts have been working on. So can you make the dream go in a particular way? Maybe not, they tell me, changing anything and everything, but having a modicum of control, and therefore making things, some things possible through your own volition. So dream control is fascinating as well.
Well, as listeners know, Max is actually he considers himself an obligate lucid dreamer. That basically every dream he's conscious in, and he dates this from being a child and having a lot of nightmares and learning that this is a dream, so I don't need to worry about that. But he's also over time discovered that it's best to not interfere with the dream. So he's lucid in the dream, but right, this isn't making that right? Okay.
Yeah. But so anyway, what I think is like, there's a message in a dream, and so it's best if I leave it alone. And I've conditioned myself to leave it alone now as an adult, or starting with my late teenage years.
Yeah. Well, one of Karen Conkley's recent papers was about problem solving in dreams. So can you find some creativity in your dream that might not be so available to you in the waking state? Because our dreamy mind seems to be so amazingly creative, and we often have problems, or, an expression is, why don't you sleep on it when you're facing a difficult decision and you want to not rush into it? And we think that sleeping on it is actually an opportunity for your unconscious processing to churn through all the different pros and cons and inform you to get a better answer. So creative problem solving seems to be possible, and even though we kind of know that's true, we also wanted to show it empirically in a research study. So Karen had people get a bunch of puzzles. They would have like word puzzles, or matchsticks, or some sort of other pictorial, figurative puzzle. And we have colleagues that study that. They study creativity and problem solving. So we used these puzzles and had people fail to solve puzzles. So we came up with a set of 6 puzzles that a particular person didn't solve. We got rid of the ones they did solve. And then each puzzle had a soundtrack. And we played those soundtracks during sleep and asked them, if you hear the soundtrack, try to work on that puzzle and come up with the solution. And we found that those soundtracks influence what people dreamed about. They were more likely to dream about the puzzles that we selected for them to reactivate. And to the extent they did that, they were more likely to come up with the answer the next day. So they didn't necessarily solve them in their lucid dreams, but their dreaming in some way must have contributed to it, because when that happened, or at least correlated with it, I should say, when they got the puzzle again the next morning and they said, okay, here's the puzzle, you've got 4 minutes to come up with an answer, they didn't necessarily know it immediately, but they were more likely to get the answer if they had dreamed about some components of the problem. In other words, their mind was churning through that puzzle and perhaps establishing a new pathway, because some of these little brain teasers, the obvious answer you think of is kind of the wrong one, and you have to disconnect from that and go and think in a new light to get the answer. And so, not surprisingly, perhaps for you guys, dreams are helpful for that, or at least they're associated with it. Frankly, I'm not sure if it's the dreams or the unconscious processing that's the precursors of the dreams, but all that's mixed up together. And I can for sure say that sleep mentation is relevant to coming up with creative solutions the next day. Again, something everyone kind of knows, but to actually see it and then be able to study it and say, okay, what's really happening in your brain while that's going on? Can we get closer to understanding how do we get creative solutions to problems? And certainly we all face a lot of problems. The world has a lot of problems. We need creative solutions, and to figure out how that comes about, we think is an exciting thing. So that was one of Karen's papers earlier. I was published in February this year about dreaming and problem solving. And it followed a prior study we had done with basically the same strategy, except during deep sleep. And it also works in deep sleep. So this is Kristen Sanders. She did the study as the first author, part of her PhD dissertation. And we can reactivate problems during deep sleep and increase the chances that you come up with a solution the next day. Maybe REM and dreaming were part of it too, because of course you went through some deep sleep, some REM sleep, cycled again. We couldn't study exactly when it happened, but our sounds, the soundtracks were played during deep sleep and correlated with the improved problem solving. It went from actually 20% to like 31, 32%. So quite a nice increase in the probability that you'd get the answer the next day.
Okay, this is very comforting to me to hear you with this very scientific approach to this. Because other than this, the first time I ever came out with a statement that I'm an obligate lucid dreamer was at a conference we were at, and somebody was presenting about the dream self versus the waking self. I said, there's no difference, is there? And everybody looked at me like I was on drugs or something. And so anyway, I appreciate the scientific approach you're taking to it.
Yeah, it's kind of fascinating that most of us that aren't like you, we experience dreams and bizarre things happen, and we just accept it. Mm-hmm. We just kind of go on and don't even take notice, which we think normally in our waking state we would take notice and say, oh, that was weird. How could that weird thing happen? And we just don't do that. Those of us that have non-lucid dreams don't do that, and we just go on our merry way. And the interpretation that's made of that is your frontal lobes aren't quite working effectively. So we know that people have damage to the frontal lobes from a stroke or a tumor or something. They have a bit of more of a difficulty checking accuracy, and they will blurt out wrong answers and not question themselves. They will be a little bit impulsive. So it kind of fits with, that's one of the things we get when our frontal lobe is working well. And it seems not to be doing that in our ordinary non-lucid dreaming. Mm-hmm. So somehow your frontal lobe is staying online and helping you. That's pretty interesting. And there aren't too many studies to actually show that that's true, because again, lucid dreaming is so rare, and you have to be in a brain scanner to see the frontal lobe activity, and not so easy to sleep in those things. So we have a little evidence, but the story, it totally fits that frontal lobe activity is one of the things that makes us think a little bit more rigorously and carefully about our experience rather than just accepting everything.
Mm-hmm. Might be interesting to see if you could practice moving your eyes back and forth while you're sleeping, because that's not changing the dream per se.
No.
Just to see if you can create some kind of a signal.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, and some of my lucid dreaming colleagues want to have something happen, so they might not try to change everything in the dream. In fact, they know, and this is true of the dream yoga practitioners too, they know you can't just change everything, but can you experiment in it to do something that might be helpful? A lot of lucid dreamers like to fly, so you're defying gravity. What other assumptions about your waking life can you break into, and how does that give you more flexibility in your thinking to not just think, oh, I'm stuck in this same thing? One of my colleagues calls that the perception box. Are you stuck in this perception box that makes you think in a certain way? Mm-hmm. And can you kind of see through that by experimenting in your dreams? That's kind of an exciting dream yoga aspect of this.
For me, the exciting thing is trying to get into that box.
So what do you mean?
Well, trying to get into the place where I'm seeing what the dream is offering me up. Because if I push the dream one way or another, there's a little ripple that's caused, I think, is the way I think of it. It might affect the dream for the whole message of the thing.
Yeah. This is Elizabeth Koch's term, the perception box. So it's meant to be describing the limitations of our experience, that we feel so limited. We feel we're, a certain personality. We have to behave a certain way. Our habitual ways of behaving are a certain way, and sometimes we want to look beyond that and say, oh, is that actually serving me? Is that actually what I want?
Well, for me in a dream, it's like if something happens that I find unpleasant, I might just quelch it. But if I really practice at it, then I can just let it go and accept it and watch it happen, roll out, see what happens.
Yeah, sometimes you can develop a little sense of curiosity of, oh, why is that bad thing here? Let me look at it and explore it. It can't really hurt me. I'm in a dream. Yeah. Nothing to hurt me. Let me walk right into it and sort of figure it out. that strategy. I'm not talking from my own experience because I don't have lucid dreams much, but I'd like to try that. How does that change how you think about these things that are happening rather than our usual running away approach?
Right, befriending the monster, that kind of thing. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
I was curious also just a little bit about using this state, whether it's lucid state or even some external influences, to around intentional dreaming. Like, is there a way that we can use it for better health, like to direct the immune system, or for outcomes in waking life, to have a better experience at something in life? Like, do you have any more thoughts about intentional dreaming, Ken?
Yeah, I think those are the new, really exciting directions of trying to find, well, what are the limits? Do we really understand the limits of what's possible in controlling bodily functions, for example, like you mentioned, or your immune system or your cardiovascular system? What can be done there? Your respiration. So we are looking at that and trying to figure out what's what might be useful that people may not realize is possible.
You guys are really making me feel a little bit off-put because I didn't explore all this stuff myself. I have a whole lifetime to do it.
Well, it's also the time being right. You're the way of people think about things shift. Like I mentioned, 30 years ago, most sleep researchers were saying, "Oh, you can't. Memory has nothing to do with dreaming or sleep.
You can't hear anything while you're sleeping."
The alarm clock is waking you up, otherwise you don't hear it, and you're cutting off that processing. So the field kind of gradually changes, and then it opens up doors for people at times that no one was thinking about before. So it's a whole big process.
Well, there's plenty of anecdotal evidence having to do with people healing themselves of cancer and various physical ailments in their dreams or by using dream intention. And so it's just, for me, opens up the idea of being open to all that and see what happens. Like, dreams are a subconscious process. We don't need to really understand them. As you said, that the people don't necessarily solve the actual problem in their dream, but they wake up and they find it easier to solve when they're awake. So there's something that happens around the problem that is helping us solve it. And so it just gives me some hope to continue playing around with the dreams. There seems like there's a lot of potential here.
Yeah, in our own experience, it's just the tip of the iceberg, right? It's just a little bit of what's going on that we're not privy to, all this other processing that's relevant. And of course that's true in our waking state. And in my field of memory research, we talk about that a lot, where there's certain memories that give you a conscious experience, like you can remember an event or some fact, but you also can have habits and conditioned responses that you don't even know about unless you can see the effects of them. So all these things are happening unconsciously. I think, in our sleep, the dreaming is like our waking experience in that it's a timeline. You think about one thing, then another thing. There's a progression of things, one at a time, one after the other, and that's kind of how our mind works during the waking state. But that's our conscious mind. And our unconscious mind isn't subject to that limitation. We can think about a dozen things at the same time. It's not, you can't even imagine that, because that's not how our conscious mind works. But unconsciously, many things are going on, and that's actually the creativity of it, is you can bring all these things together and see how they fit together, see kind of patterns that your conscious mind can't quite see because they're, involving all these things kind of simultaneously, and our unconscious mind has the freedom to not be single track and bring many things together at once. And so I think that's kind of the richness of this processing. It's certainly part of creativity and problem solving and the way our brains work.
Dr. Ken Pollard, this is a really fabulous conversation. There's so much more. Your webpage is kenpollard.com. Check it out. There's all kinds of interesting video, audio, and links to articles to learn more. And of course, you can come to the IASD conference and find out about and meet him in person. Ask him all your questions. So do you have any parting encouragements you want to leave our listeners with?
Well, I don't know the whole context of your weekly show. Katherine, it's really exciting to be exploring this territory, and I think certainly there's a lot to offer that we ignore in the on the dark side. A lot of interesting things are happening, And with too much of a focus on our waking life, we might miss out some of the richness of that. So we have to really cherish our sleep and all that it gives us, not all of which we understand.
Love that,
Can
cherishing our
understand
sleep.
it.
Well, you know, the tagline for the show is a dream can be meaningful if you don't know what it means. We can say sleep can be helpful even if we don't know how. We don't know exactly what it's doing. Thank you so much, Ken. This has been fabulous.
Thank you.
So thank you all for listening. The Dream Journal is produced at the studios of KSQD in Santa Cruz. We are live every Saturday at 10 a.m. Pacific at ksqd.org. The podcast is released on the Monday after the show. It spreads interest in dreaming when you subscribe, rate, and review. I am Katherine Bell. You can find out about my dream coaching practice at experientialdreamwork.com. You can email me at katherine@ksqd.org. Follow Experiential Dreamwork and hashtag The Dream Journal on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn to keep up with the shows. I'd like to thank Rick Cluffel, engineer and music creator. Audio editing by Suki Westling. Phones by Eric Nelson. Intro and outro pieces are both by Mood Science. And tomorrow morning when you wake up, take a minute to write down your dream and bring it to the next Dream Journal.
There's a time